London, 1961. The city was gray with fog and Cold War tension. Every newspaper carried stories of spies, defectors, and secrets sold behind closed doors. Inside Whitehall, Charles Ashworth was a rising star, the Secretary of State for War, a decorated war hero turned politician, married to a beautiful actress and widely tipped for the cabinet's top table. Colleagues called him ambitious but careful, a man who never seemed to put a foot wrong. That summer, Ashworth was invited to Marlow Park, a sprawling country estate owned by his old friend, Lord Pemberton. It was the kind of weekend where champagne flowed freely, orchestras played until dawn, and secrets were kept behind oak-paneled doors and manicured hedges. By the flood-lit swimming pool, past midnight, Ashworth met Vivian Lark, 19 years old, a dancer at a fashionable London club, laughing barefoot on the terrace with a glass of champagne in her hand. Their eyes met across the water. Within days they were meeting in secret, in borrowed Mayfair flats and darkened cars parked down quiet side streets, always careful, always watching for followers. Ashworth believed it was simply a discreet affair, the kind powerful men had always managed to keep hidden. He had no idea Vivian was already entangled with another man at the very same estate, a Soviet military attaché named Dmitry Rusakov, who had his own careful, calculated reasons for cultivating a friendship with a beautiful English woman with access to powerful men. Watching all of this unfold from the shadows was Dr. Julian Vane, a fashionable London osteopath who treated the aristocracy, and who had personally introduced Vivian to half of high society. Vane liked to boast over dinner parties that he knew where all the bodies were buried. Soon, that phrase would prove far more literal than anyone at Marlow Park could have imagined. For now, it was simply a scandal waiting quietly to happen. A cabinet minister, a chorus girl, and a Soviet spy, all connected by one smiling doctor who saw everything and said nothing, yet. By early 1962, whispers had reached the intelligence services. A junior officer at MI5 reviewing routine surveillance reports flagged an unusual pattern. The same young woman, Vivian Lark, was seen leaving both the Secretary of State's private residence and Colonel Rusakov's apartment in the same week, sometimes within hours of each other. This was no longer just a matter of embarrassment. If Vivian repeated pillow talk from Ashworth's late-night visits, troop movements, defense briefings, the placement of nuclear weapons on British soil to a Soviet officer, it was a national security crisis of the first order. A file was quietly opened, marked with a classification few clerks were permitted to see. Dr. Vane was interviewed first, since he moved comfortably in both circles and seemed to know everyone worth knowing. He was calm, charming, and evasive, offering just enough truth to seem cooperative. He admitted knowing Vivian, admitted knowing the colonel, but insisted, smiling, that he'd never mixed business with pleasure. Yet colleagues later recalled something strange in the weeks that followed. After his MI5 interview, Vane became almost obsessed with keeping written records of every conversation. He began carrying a small leather diary everywhere he went, jotting notes after every phone call, every dinner, every chance encounter at a party. He told one close friend, half joking over brandy, "If this all comes out, I want proof of exactly who did what and who asked me to keep quiet about it." Meanwhile, panic set in for Ashworth. He wrote Vivian a hurried, badly worded letter begging her to stay quiet about their arrangement. It was signed only with his first initial, a small precaution he thought would protect him. It was a mistake that would haunt him for the rest of his career, because Vivian, ever practical and never sentimental, kept it folded inside a hatbox under her bed. The pieces were now in place for a scandal that would rock the government to its foundations. In March 1962, a gossip column ran a teasing paragraph about a cabinet minister's late-night visitor, without naming names, hinting only at scandal in high places. Fleet Street's finest reporters, sensing blood in the water, began circling like sharks, chasing down every rumor from Marlow Park to Mayfair. Then came the detail that changed everything. A jealous rival of Vivian's, furious over a broken promise, sold the story of the initialed letter to a tabloid for a substantial sum. Within days, Charles Ashworth's name was splashed across every front page in the country. He stood before a packed House of Commons, hands trembling slightly, and denied any impropriety in a carefully rehearsed statement, a denial that would later prove to be a catastrophic, career-ending lie. The press descended on Dr. Vane's fashionable Marylebone consulting rooms, camping outside for days with cameras and notebooks. Vane, once so composed and charming, began to visibly unravel under the pressure. Former patients suddenly refused to be associated with him, canceling appointments overnight. His practice collapsed within weeks. Friends who visited said he grew increasingly paranoid, jumping at footsteps in the hallway, convinced someone wanted him silenced before he could speak to investigators. He wasn't wrong to worry. Someone with far more to lose than Vane was watching the scandal spiral out of control. Someone quietly, methodically, calculating just how much damage the full truth could do, and who else in government might be dragged down alongside Ashworth if Vane ever spoke freely. 2 weeks before Vane was due to give evidence to a government inquiry, he told a close friend in a lowered voice that he had insurance, his leather diary, now supposedly hidden somewhere safe, detailing exactly who knew what and precisely when they knew it. He never got the chance to hand it over. On a wet April morning, Dr. Julian Vane was found dead in his car on a quiet road called Cliffwood Lane, on the edge of London. Police ruled it an overdose of sleeping pills, a suicide, they said, brought on by public disgrace and the collapse of his once thriving practice. But almost immediately, people close to Vane rejected that explanation. Friends insisted he had been in surprisingly good spirits just days before, actively preparing his testimony line by line, not a man planning to end his life. His housekeeper swore his leather diary, the one he called his insurance, was missing from his desk drawer, though every other belonging in his study, down to his fountain pen, was left untouched and exactly in its place. The inquest was brief. No note was found. No witnesses came forward. The coroner, under quiet pressure to close the matter swiftly, recorded a verdict of suicide within a single afternoon. Ashworth resigned from government within weeks, his career in ruins, his marriage strained but ultimately surviving the ordeal. Colonel Rusakov was quietly recalled to Moscow before British investigators could question him further, vanishing from the story as abruptly as he had entered it. Vivian Lark disappeared from public life entirely, reportedly moving abroad under a different name, never granting an interview again. The official inquiry closed the file soon after. Case closed. Verdict: personal tragedy, political embarrassment, nothing more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Yet one junior investigator, a young clerk named Thomas Reddy, who had helped catalog Vane's belongings that grim morning, always believed the diary was real and that its disappearance was no coincidence at all. He kept his suspicions in a private notebook of his own, certain that somewhere someone had made very sure Vane's insurance never saw daylight. For decades, that suspicion had nowhere to go. The scandal became a footnote in British political history, messy, embarrassing, but officially unsolved in its darkest, quietest corner. In 2019, nearly 60 years after the scandal, a house clearance company was emptying a small flat in Brighton belonging to a woman who had recently died. A woman who, records later showed, had once worked as Dr. Vane's private secretary back in 1962, taking his dictation and filing his correspondence. Tucked inside a biscuit tin in her attic, wedged beneath a stack of old photographs, clearance workers found a bundle of yellowed letters and a single torn page, water-stained but still legible, written in the same distinctive looping handwriting as Vane's known correspondence. It read like a page ripped straight from a diary. Dated 3 days before his death, it described a tense late-night visit from a man sent by someone very senior who wanted the book back and warned Vane that silence would be rewarded and the alternative would not be pleasant. The torn page also named names, including, according to a historian later brought in to examine it, a fixer connected closely to Ashworth's inner circle, a man never once questioned by the original inquiry, his role in the affair entirely unknown until now. When the discovery reached the press in 2020, retired clerk Thomas Reddy, then in his 90s but sharp of memory, confirmed the handwriting matched notes he remembered from Vane's file all those years ago. For the first time in nearly 6 decades, there was physical evidence supporting what many had long quietly suspected, that Vane's death was not the simple tragedy the official record claimed, and that someone had visited him, threatened him directly, and very likely taken his diary before he died. But the torn page named no single person as the killer, only a role, a man sent by someone very senior. No new prosecution followed. The fixer, if he ever existed under any name investigators could trace, was never identified, never questioned, and never found. To this day, the identity of the man who silenced Julian Vane remains unknown. The diary itself has never resurfaced. Somewhere, perhaps, it still sits in a drawer, an attic, or a fire's ashes, the one piece of proof that could finally close the case, forever just out of reach. If this story kept you hooked till the very last second, that missing diary is still out there somewhere, and so is the truth. Hit that subscribe button right now, because we uncover cases like this every single week, scandals the history books tried to bury. Smash that like button if you want to see more forgotten mysteries dragged back into the light. And if you know someone who loves a good true crime story, share this video with them right now. Don't let them miss it. Drop a comment below telling us who you think silenced Dr. Vane. We read every single one. See you in the next case.